River, Grand Canyon Boatman Stories, and it's about the two of the owners of Arizona River Runners back in the day when they were in their 20s running down here. The fellow who runs the booking office, Bruce Winter, and the fellow we refer to as our boss, Bill Gleckler. So here we go. It was 1972, a 3-boat trip. Bill Gleckler was the trip leader. He was 23 at the time, and this was maybe his 10th trip. The other boatmen, way junior in experience, were Bruce Winter and Bart Henderson. Bart was freelancing that year and had just met the others. This is his story. He told it to a bunch of us at Vermilion Cliffs years ago, and we laughed so hard we cried. They had a tight schedule, but overall the mission seemed simple enough. Run empty to Phantom Ranch on the first day. Then pick up 45 passengers on the morning of the second day. Deposit everybody at Diamond Creek, that's mile point 225. Early on day 5 and drive the boats back around to the ferry that same night, rig the next morning, and start another trip. They got to the warehouse at the crack of dawn on day 1, and to their surprise, the food wasn't packed. Well, that set them back an hour or two. They finished rigging at the ferry around noon. Still only a few hours behind schedule, but then none of the motors would start. None of them. They carried 3 per boat, but all those were mismatched. They'd been given 3 different sizes, 30s, 35s, and 40s. Gleckler grinned, said a few swear words. He tinkered around and cannibalized what they had, and finally left the ferry late in the afternoon with 1 working motor for each boat. They ran the 20s in the pitch dark and tied up in the rocks below 25 Mile Rapid, pretty scared. Gleckler rubbed his hands together and drew a big breath. Well, we've had a hard day, boys, but I think the worst of the trip's behind us, he said. Let's cook some steaks. They lit a Coleman lantern and rustled up some wood, got a little fire going in the rocks. They had to have some steak sauce too, so Bruce took the lantern and went down to find it. He crossed him up on the rocks, though, and he fell just as he got to the river. The lantern exploded. A huge ball of flame erupted next to the upstream boat, and then everything went black. Up on shore, their eyes were adjusted to the light, and after the fireball, nobody saw anything but spots. "Bruce!" Gleckler yelled in the darkness. "Are you okay?" No answer, but the hiss of the shattered lantern, that and the swift rush of the current sweeping along the shoreline, stacking into the boats, running under half an acre of rubber. They groped their way down to the upstream side of the boats. Really, it was too dark to move. "Uh-oh," Gleckler said. "He's under the boat." "He's dead," the swamper moaned. "He's history." The swamper's name was Joe. This was his second trip ever. 30 yards downstream, they heard choking and sputtering, and then a cry. "I'm okay," Bruce yelled. "Whew," Gleckler said. "Thank God." For a moment there was silence. Everybody breathed a huge sigh of relief. No, I am not," Bruce yelled. "I am not okay." They got a flashlight and checked him out. He had a 12-inch gash from knee to ankle, and the blood was pumping forth in great spurts. Gleckler sucked a little air through his teeth and squinted at Bart. "We'll have to sew him up," he said. "Better get some whiskey." Well, they didn't have any sutures in the first aid kit, so Bart got some cotton thread and a straight needle out of the patch kit instead.
Ooh.
You guys familiar with what a upholstery repair kit is?
Yeah.
All right.
Ooh.
Yeah. I love it. So Joe brought the whiskey. Bruce's dad was a surgeon, so they figured maybe that qualified Gleckler to do the job. Bruce didn't want any whiskey, though, so Gleckler drank some, and then Bart had some, too. And then Gleckler poured a healthy shot on Bruce's leg, stitched it up. Next day, they promoted Joe to boatman and moved Bruce up to coach. Joe did pretty good until they got to Hance, but he dinged his motor there, so they had to stop and cannibalize a couple more of the dead spares. They arrived at Phantom Ranch around 4 in the afternoon. The people weren't there. They went to the ranger station and summoned a chopper to evac Bruce, and Gleckler called Henry, the owner of the company. "You boys just sit tight," Henry said. "You hear? Don't leave without him." So they begged the ranger to let them stay the night at Phantom, and finally he acquiesced. Bruce got evac'd, and the others went to bed. Just before he went to sleep, Bart had a thought. Maybe they won't come. He said out loud, "Please, God, don't let them come." The people came down the trail that night. As luck would have it, all 45 of them in the darkness. So next morning, there was nothing to do but go. They had 150 miles to make in a little over 2 days. So as long as they didn't hike anything or let the people have too many pit stops, Bart figured they might just make it. Gleckler took a good boat and the second best motor, which is kind of a clunker. He gave Joe the worst boat and the worst motor and told Joe to stay right behind him. To Bart, he gave the good boat and the fastest motor of all. "Okay, buddy," told Bart. "You just hang back and pick up the pieces." So off they went, balls to the wall. Somehow they made it through intact until they got to Crystal. Naturally, they didn't stop to scout it. There was really no time for that. And then again, there was Joe, never having run the river before, and uh-oh, there he went, straight off Adolph into the big hole. Crash! 45 degrees. The boat contorted wildly. People tumbled every which way, and then it plowed straight over the rock island with Joe crouched in the cockpit, maintaining a death grip on the throttle, still motoring away. Crash! Bam! Bang! Crash! So Bart could see the motor jumping every time it hit a rock. The boat hung here, spun there, and finally it floated off somehow, and Bart caught them just below in the eddy. Well, the motor was destroyed, and about 4 sections of the boat were completely flat, hanging dead underneath the frame. Now, the thing about Henry's boats and those aircraft carrier decks, though, is you could lose a few sections and keep on going. So Gleckler came over and studied the situation. No problem, he said. We'll patch her tonight. We just got to make another engine work now, and we're doing fine. That's our boss, man. So Gleckler got in there and took a lower unit off one, stole a carburetor from another one. They got one working. They camped somewhere not that far down, cooked dinner in the dark. It started to rain. It rained all night. They took off the next morning. It was still raining. The river became a chocolate brown swirl, and water streamed off the cliff faces. They ran all day long in the river, and the rain never let up for a second. The people were in shock by then. They were starting to look and act like prisoners of war. The boatmen went full throttle all the way. The only thing they were thinking about by that time was escape. They had made it down just above lava, and here came a plane, circling. It was Henry himself. "Diamond Creek's washed out, boys," he said. "You're going to have to make it down there to Pierce Ferry with these people." Henry was sweating bullets over his next trip was the deal. He had to have Gleckler there to lead it in at least one of those boats. They forged on, but somewhere around Parashant Wash, Joe dinged another engine, and this time it wasn't quite so simple to get a new one working. Oop, lost my smoker.